The purge is underway, as you know. In fact, it's gaining steam. And they'll tell you that it is for the worst elements of our society. They'll tell you that it's about getting rid of white supremacists, domestic terrorists, awful, violent people, insurrectionists. But when you listen to the actual language they use, it's much broader than that. It's really an attempt to try to smear anyone who is right of center, if they voted for Trump, if they were a part of any of the pro-Trump rallies, particularly after the election. They must be evil. And our institutions have to be cleansed of this. And cleansing is obviously a term that should put everyone's the hair on their arms standing up. That's not something that we should be thinking of when we're talking about government bodies, and especially when you're looking at the military. But this is now the plain language of the Democrat Party today. You've got Joe Biden, for example, who's out there talking about white supremacy as an enemy that we must combat. And I would just say, as we look at this, we need to remember that this is a group of people. When you're talking about actual white supremacists, it's a group of people who are marginalized and maligned all throughout society, including on the right, and rightly so. But how often do we go around really worried about flat earthers overtaking the scientific community? I mean, how often do we go around thinking that some fringe group of lunatics are really about to overthrow the United States government, or some radical, violent, extremist entity from within is just days away from trying to launch some kind of a coup? There's a hysteria around this. We should all recognize that. We should see it for what it is. And it's very concerning to me because I've been sounding the alarm about the expansion of the term white supremacy to include things that no reasonable, rational person would ever say are, in fact, white supremacist. When you use that term in the past, and you can go back to movies in the 90s, go back to pop culture, and the way we would talk about these things, if you heard of a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist, it was going to be a person who was hateful toward other races, who was vicious, evil, covered in swastikas, usually shaved head. There were all these things, skinheads. There were all these signifiers. And it was like a jihadist. It was a person who had become overtaken by an evil ideology. And it was they're heinous. I mean, they're the bad guy. We all get that. The same way that any Nazi would be a bad guy. The same way that any communist is a bad guy or jihadist, right? These are extreme ideologies that always result in violence, authoritarianism, and destruction if they achieve power. And even if they're out of power, they can be destructive on a smaller scale. So we all understood that white supremacy was bad. We all get that. The same way that we all know murder is bad. This is a very straightforward thing. But now when you hear the terminology and when you hear the usage of this, all of a sudden white supremacy is having too many books by white authors in a store. White supremacy, and this is how the left talks about it. I know you hear this, you say that's crazy. White supremacy is somebody advocating against affirmative action in college admissions and pointing to how it discriminates against Asian Americans more than anyone else in the process. White supremacy. Right? Why should we shut down gifted and talented schools or schools for the gifted more generally that overprivilege the Asian American community? Well, it's because of the system of white supremacy we have. This is what people will say. And now we have an entire government that is latching on to this as the boogeyman, so to speak. This is the evil that we are all supposed to be hiding under our beds from, or worried is hiding under our bed, if you think about the way the boogeyman is usually thought of. This is what we're supposed to be confronting as a society. We're in the middle of a pandemic, a double pandemic of a disease and draconian authoritarian lockdowns from the disease that do not work. If Governor Ron DeSantis says it, I can say it. Censor that. Social media platforms. I'm on radio. What now? Governor Ron DeSantis is right. I'm right. They did not work. These lockdowns were a failure. But let me get back to white supremacy here for a moment. I want to read you. This is in the Military Times, right, which, obviously focuses on defense issues and United States Armed Services. And it's about Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. I actually remember I was in Baghdad years ago, and I was part of a briefing. He wouldn't remember me. I was interchangeable with all the other guys walking around dressed like they were on a camping trip. What are you guys doing here? Oh, you're those guys, right? I was one of those in the war zone. But I sat down, I briefed him. I remember thinking that this guy had the kind of command presence among a lot of other senior folk that he probably had a future in politics. But I remember General Austin, and now Military Times writing, he's now the Secretary of Defense, as you know, and he's called on, quote, services to conduct a 60-day stand down on the issue of extremism in the military, prompted by the January 6th attack on the Capitol and subsequent reports of active duty and former service members attending a rally calling to overturn the 2020 election and the riot that ensued. Hold on a second. Look what this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. We got to do a whole stand down. We got to do a hot wash. We got to do a after action report. We have to do a review of white nationalist or white supremacist extremism in the military. And then when they go to describe what we're talking about here, it's people who attended a rally to overturn the 2020 election. I know people who were at the rally in D.C. on January 6th, and they were there because they believed that there was a need for election results, for the argument over election results to be had in the United States Congress for the presentation of evidence, and they thought that was within the system and the right thing to do. They really believed that there had been a stolen election. I know many people still believe that there was a stolen election. That doesn't make them white supremacists. There's nothing to do with it. The same way that the Capitol Hill riot wasn't a white supremacist riot, but you see how now they take this action and some of the individuals involved and everybody who's even vaguely ideologically associated with them, including thousands and thousands of people. They estimate 800 people stormed Capitol Hill. There were at least 100,000 people in D.C. on that day. So it's about 1%, maybe. And I know some people say it was much larger than that. So about 1% of the people gathered actually broke the law and did something wrong. Everybody else, what they did, you can disagree with how they view the election, but they are completely within their rights, and I support their right to lawfully protest and have their voices heard in our nation's capital. This is very straightforward. This is about principle. But look what they did. They're calling here for former service members, quote, attending a rally calling to overturn the 2020 election. Attendance at the rally is cause for suspicion. That's all you have to do. If you engaged in lawful protest, if you're former military, if you're current military for sure, you are now somebody that maybe can't be trusted. You're an insurrectionist. This is what they say. This is what we're told. And the guidance from Austin is as follows. Quote, it wasn't just a blithe go talk to your people of Austin's direction to the service secretaries and joint chiefs. He was very clear he wants commands to take the necessary time to speak with troops about the scope of this problem and get a sense from them about what they're seeing at their level. Do you think that some kind of wimpy left-wing bureaucrat type, which they exist everywhere, there are those people even in the military. Do you think that they're going to see somebody with a MAGA flag over their bunk? Do you think that they're going to see somebody who still thinks that the Gadsden flag is a cool design from history and they want to, and maybe they get reported? Just give it time. Just give it time. This is really upsetting to see, because you can understand why this is going to get worse. Why are they doing this? White supremacy in the military? This is all of a sudden we've discovered this problem because of the January 6th riot. That's what they're saying. This is political. I've never met a white supremacist. I mean, I point this out to people. I have met jihadist terrorists. I have met, people of other extremist ideologies. And I'm not saying there aren't white supremacists. You always have to establish these things that every sane person knows. Of course, there are white supremacists. There are evil racists. Are they powerful in this country? They're the most, and rightly so, maligned people in all of American society. I mean, you won't be able to get a job, to rent or buy a home, to be on the internet. I mean, you're a target for everybody. You're a white supremacist, an actual white supremacist in the real sense of the term. But that's not what this is about. We've already got that problem is contained and controlled. They're losers. They're trying to expand the concept of white supremacy to include people who attend, and I'm reading to you from this article, attended the rally on January 6th. Didn't break any laws, didn't go into the Capitol, but if you attended the rally, you're a suspect. This is what authoritarian regimes do. They have to cleanse wrongthink from within major institutions like the military and like the federal bureaucracy. Military Times' own polling, quote, has shown that anecdotally, that sounds really official, more than 1/3 of active duty troops and more than half of minority service members have witnessed signs of white supremacy in their colleagues. Further, survey respondents ranked white nationalism as a bigger national security threat than domestic terrorist groups affiliated with Islam, for instance. The events of January 6th served as a wake-up call. It's amazing to see this. I mean, you're telling me that, let's be very clear, because of this ideology of wokeness, actually, that's out there, that sees wokeness means white supremacy is all around us and it's everywhere, and we have to constantly combat it. They've created this omnipresent white supremacy. As a result of that, you have service members here saying they've, quote, witnessed signs of white supremacy. Half of minority service members say they've seen that. Really? Like what? Where? What counts as that? And I really mean that. I'd like to know. Is it who gets promoted and who doesn't? Is that the kind of white supremacy we're talking about? Because remember how the definition's expanded? Or is it somebody who actually, is a member of some kind of white power society and has a swastika tattoo on his knuckles? Which one is it? Because there's a whole lot of difference between those two things. But you see, this is a power move, and the chilling effect on conservatism on the right in general, from pretending there's this huge threat of white supremacy that's everywhere, it's even in our military. This is a hysterical lie, but it's a very potent one if you want to keep people fearful and if you want to make sure that you can get away with whatever mechanisms of control you decide to deploy. This is happening within our own military, and it's happening from the top down, from the Secretary of Defense. Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.